Yes, we got this.
Welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we're rising out of the ashes together. If you are not new to Suffering in Silence, you'll notice that I am not Pastor Tia. I'm one of the co-hosts, Jennifer Peterkin. Pastor Tia is not with us this evening, so we're just going to have to go on without her. So tonight's topic is plans and insights for 2025, moving forward with advocacy. Right now, I am joined by my co-host, Erin Mitchell, and hopefully we'll be joined by some of our other co-hosts later as well. So Erin, if you'd like to greet our listeners.
Yes, thank you everybody from Love Bay Radio. I'm just so excited to be here on this Friday with all of you. I love the idea that all of our listeners are from all over the world. That always gets me super excited because I love to connect with each and every one of you from all your beautiful places where you're from and all the different time zones. Just so honored to be here with Jennifer Peterkin and also just, really working with Pastor Tia over the years with her advocacy work to prevent and support people that have experienced and are experiencing domestic violence through her organization, Rise Out of the Ashes. So we are, both Jennifer and I are on the board of Tia's organization, and we also, each of us have had our own journeys in that realm. I got involved with this radio show as a guest at first for Pastor Tia through my work with Indigenous women and girls with an empowerment and self-defense training program that I developed, a facilitator training program that I developed for First Nations and tribal nations in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And that's how I got involved in this radio show, and also with Pastor Tia and Jennifer here. So look forward to having this conversation to see what the year, what lies ahead. And also just the fact that I feel like when we vision forward and we think about what we want to, what some of our intentions are, I think that really helps us to stay focused and motivated for change and what we want to accomplish in any given time period. So look forward to this conversation with you all.
Yes, thank you. For our listeners, if you have any questions or comments for Erin or myself or Tia, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com or text 437-778-3299. If you have resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, community, local organizations, or your faith community, please email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. We are in the process of raising funds for our nonprofit that Erin mentioned, Rise Out of the Ashes. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation, you can do so through our GoFundMe fundraiser, or you can write a check made payable to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., and send that to P.O. Box 15, Drexel Hill, PA, 19026. A few resources for today before we get started. The Canadian Women's Foundation, they can be reached at canadianwomen.org. Their number is 1-866-293-4483, and their email is info@canadianwomen.org. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is thehotline.org, and they can be reached at 1-800-799-7233. And the UK National Domestic Abuse Helpline is nationaldahelpline.org.uk, and they can be reached at 080-2000-247 or visit Women's Aid at womensaid.org.uk. So, with that, we will get into our discussion about 2025 and moving forward in advocacy. So, I'm actually really excited to have this conversation, Erin, because especially with you, I haven't talked to you in a little while. It's been a little while that we've been able to chat, and even specifically this conversation. So, I would love to know kind of how 2024 rounded out for you and what you're looking forward to in 2025.
Yeah, 2024 was a really interesting year. I'd wrapped up a kind of a pilot program in 23, and then a little bit into the first part of 24, which was around working with individuals to go kind of narrow and deep on their healing journeys, and kind of transition from my work with groups into working with individuals and on a holistic level. And so I wanted to kind of test that model because I feel like, I guess for what I was noticing was each person is so unique on their journey, and there's a lot of groups out there. But other than one-on-one therapy or, psychotherapy or like doctor patient kind of scenarios, there's not really a lot of holistic support on a one-on-one level.
Mm.
So I wanted to kind of test that model out, and so that's how that wrapped up. I then got an opportunity to be a producer on a movie about a cancer survivor, and so I took up that job and
Wow.
jumped in. I do have a background on documentaries, and I did produce a few documentaries on murdered and missing Indigenous women when I was, working with that community. This one happened to be about, like I said, a breast cancer survivor who was a world champion barrel racer. And so just wrapped up filming on that. And yeah, I think, like, honestly, just to make it relevant, obviously, for the show and this topic, I feel like more and more my work is pointing me to supporting people on the inside job
Hmm.
it takes to really heal and be kind of a force in the world. It's like I think for decades of my life, I feel like I've focused on trying to work on things that were external to me, things that were happening politically, things that were happening, um, you know, nationally, things that were happening with certain, um, you know, uh, tragedies that were honestly like, they touched me, but they were bigger than me. They were so
Mhm.
much bigger than me. And I just more recently in the last couple years, especially, or maybe just last year, because you said to tell me how that wrapped up and where I'm going with this, is just to say that, like, I feel like I'm really ready for the inside job. Like, I'm really ready for bringing those eyes inward on me and then supporting people to do the same, not just giving them the space so that they can kind of self-reflect and do that, um, kind of, I call it brutal self-examination.
Yeah, and it is
you
brutal.
know it is so brutal. It's brutal at first, at least,
Yes.
because again, like, our eyes are, well, my eyes have been looking outward and seeing how I can jump in and help some cause or something that's like so big. But now I'm like, okay, what can I work on the inner levels with, and how can I support people on their journeys to do that?
Hmm. I love that. It's so interesting because advocacy, I think, leads to incredible opportunity, and there's so much growth in doing advocacy work, whatever that means for you. That's everybody is made to do different things. Um, but as you're kind of going through all of the different things that your hand is in, it's just making me reflect on the fact that I don't think I've ever had as much opportunity come my way than when I am working in some sort of advocacy or some sort of, trying to be a part of a solution role, right? And so I think there's so much power in advocacy. But to that same, in that same breath, it is very easy to get burnt out doing advocacy work, because once those opportunities do start coming, you feel like you just want to keep saying yes, right? Like there's almost a high that comes with it to get like, yes, like I want to be involved with this. There's community, there's teamwork, there's change, like you're affecting change. And it's very easy, and you have to be very intentional to not get burnt out. And I say that as somebody who has gotten burnt out doing advocacy work
Me too. Me too.
times, right? Like you're not immune to it. So I love what you're talking about with the inner reflection, because as somebody that has been in therapy, still in therapy, um,
Hmm.
it's very hard. You don't realize how much you don't realize how dishonest with yourself you are, right? And how much your brain kind of just allows you to cope with certain things, or kind of tricks you into coping with certain things until you actually have to be intentional in facing them head on, right? And so I think what's so interesting about the work you're moving into now, from where you're coming from, is that you are such a good, I mean, for multiple reasons, but specifically, you are such a good person to talk about that journey as somebody that has had, you know, more going outward than you could even possibly, than anybody could possibly even handle, and realizing what strength comes from um, being intentional with how honest you are with yourself and your self-reflection, and becoming your most authentic self, and how much more you actually have to give when you are centered in that kind of capacity.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, I second that. I second that fully of burnout. Um, it's really been decades of it, like just in different capacities. But I think that what you were saying about the brain tricking us, yeah, that is so fascinating to me. And what I've been really diving into is our nervous system and our nervous system's responses and the imprints that our nervous system has on our bodies, um, and from our experiences going back from ages like birth to 7, and
Mm,
then our young, like younger childhood life, and then into the teenager life. I
yeah.
mean, you're talking about like birth to 18. Your operating system, like a computer board, is
Mm,
built. It's set in stone. It's built. And I think a lot of us have the pattern of like, you know, thinking we can change things with our logical brains. But, our bodies, that again, that like inner programming has already been set. And so you can't use logic to tell that system, because
yeah.
it's like right and left brain different. They're not communicating. You can't use logic to tell that system how not to react, or how not to be impacted by what's around us. And so, so for me, like that trick of the brain that you were talking about, I think is like really stumped me to get to age 48 and be like, now wait a minute here. I have been working on myself for so long. Like, what is going on here? And And what's really going on here is like, I wasn't using the language that my nervous system needs to repair some of these imprints from trauma, from experiences, little traumas, big traumas, and even like our worldview of, do I walk around and just generally feel that people are dangerous, right?
Mm.
Like, I might logically know that's not the case, but does my body act that way? And it
Your
does.
experience, you know, clue you in that that is true. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
huge. That's huge. I think that, you know, one of the conversations around trauma that we don't have enough is that trauma isn't, a lot of things can be trauma, and there is a scale, right? Or there's a spectrum. I'm sorry, there's
Yep.
a spectrum. It's
Mm-hmm.
not all the same thing, and it doesn't affect us all the same way. But there's, like you said, big trauma, little trauma. There's community trauma. There's generational trauma, which we talked about a couple weeks ago with Tia. Like, there is so much there, and um, our brains, again, our brains are so good at protecting us.
Mm-hmm.
They're too good at protecting us, because we walk around thinking like, I'm fine. Like, I'm totally fine. I'm great. Like, I have this you know, this pain in my lower back that I've never been able to get rid of, and you know, I have all this like crippling anxiety, and I have all of this other stuff, but that's separate. Like, that just happened. I'm fine though. And it's like, a, you know, coming to the holistic piece of this, no, this is all connected. It all contributes to each other. Um, and when we talk about healing, we can't quadrant off our mental, emotional, physical well being and attempt to address them all separately and think that we're going to get anywhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think this is a great conversation within the realm, or the context of advocacy, because it really is so important to understand that we, as in any sort of advocacy work, we really cannot be helpful to other people truly, long term, if we are not well ourselves.
Yeah. And I think the big key word there is long term,
Yeah.
right? And that's really what it's really what we're talking about as a society, as a planet, is, you know, sustainability.
Hmm.
And when we talk about it in all cases, we have to not run out of water. We have to figure out how to not run out of clean water,
Hmm.
as a globe. You know, we have to figure out how to not run out of compassion.
Mm.
Um, and they, you know, we call it compassion fatigue. We have to figure out how to not run out of healthy food for our communities. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can apply it, but yeah, that you're right. Like that long-term piece for advocacy, I think would be so much better strengthened if we learn ourselves how to resource, from within.
Yeah.
And there are truly ways to do that. It's really magnificent, because I think another piece I'll just mention too, Jennifer, is that I have been running around my life looking to others to tell me how to heal
Mm.
my back pain, my trauma, my anxiety, you know, whatever. And it's like, you're the expert. This is how it goes. It's like, oh my gosh, you're the expert, or you're the spiritual leader or teacher, or
Mm.
you're, you know, you're better at this than me, or all these things. And it's just like a constant projection of, you know, putting my health and well-being and wholeness into somebody else's hands, and having them really wanting them to fix me. And so this new, again, moving forward, right, in 2025, this new deep awareness that I am committed to is that nobody has those answers for me.
Mm.
And that resource is within me. And it's within me through my connection to myself, which is connecting me to my greater power, whatever that is defined as for each individual, as God, as love, as, whatever that is for each person. And that is that relationship and healing that connection to myself, because every time my body is in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which, is going to happen for all of us, I have essentially disconnected from, my true self in a way. It gets us. It's a survival mechanism that is incredibly powerful and should be honored and respected. And if I'm in that place throughout my life, if somebody looks at me funny, if somebody flips me off when I'm driving, if, even more, more dangerous situations where you could be being targeted in some way, like it's like, it doesn't matter what that spectrum is. My body's response is still
Right.
one of those, right? And then I'm disconnected. Then I'm like, I'm not liking myself. I'm thinking I'm a failure. I'm judging myself for not being able to handle this situation, and just like the whole gamut, right? So
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Big yes. No, I love it. I love what you're saying. It's such an important topic to discuss. And I actually, to be honest, I recently, I took a break from therapy for about 4 years. I just recently started up again. And I am, the reason that I started again was because I was like doing my emotional check ins with myself, and I was able to understand emotionally where I was at and mentally where I was at, and like why I was feeling the things that I was feeling. I could be very good at like identifying that, but my body was flipping into my fear response all of the time. And it still is a little bit, but I'm trying I'm working on it. But it's so interesting because, like, it took me a while to figure out that that's what was happening. And so I'm just like, you know, the catalyst is having panic attacks, right? Like that's end stage type thing. And for me, and so I'm like, why? Why am I having these panic attacks? Like nothing is really changing so significantly, or like I am not in a place where I don't understand what's happening, what's going on. And talking with my therapist who I just adore, she's just reinforcing for me, like, this is all the stuff that has already happened, and your body, your brain is remembering it. And so even though there's part of your brain that is processing it and understanding what's happening and able to put it in a certain place, there's another part of your brain that goes, oh, this is when we're in danger, we have to figure out what to do next. And I think it's so important that listening to ourselves, listening to our bodies, what our bodies are telling us. I mean, even as somebody that has been practicing that in some way for more than 10 years, I still like it still took me months to figure that out about myself, that I was switching into my fear response like too often and too quickly. And so it's just really interesting that we have the capacity, like you're saying, it's all within us. We have the capacity to understand, we have the capacity to heal, but we really have to be willing and able to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. And when we do that, when we are centered in that, um, I find that there's so much more room to go outwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not pushing in a singularly outward mission, and you're
Totally.
focusing first internally to then be able to push that out. I think that becomes so much more expansive.
Totally. Yeah, it is I mean, it's the quintessential, cycle of the earth, right? Like the seasons. There's
Mm,
just kind of the death of the fall and the leaves and the debris, and then that decomposition happens, and then the winter, the soil's frozen, and then it's resting, the seeds are resting, and then in the springtime, what do we see? We see that growth, we see the blooms coming, and the pollinators arriving, and the color, and then we see the peak of summer where it's like abundant, and and then we're harvesting these fruits on the trees that are like dropping, and everybody's getting fed, and then it declines again, and it's not really a decline. It is, but it's a cycle of that. Okay, it's time to not give, right?
mhm.
It's time for the earth to rest. It's time. And so with ourselves, we also have those cycles. And I think some of this internal resourcing and some of the, our willingness to um, learn the language of our body, like learn the nervous system's language. Because again, it's not logic that's working it, right? It's very autonomic. And if there's something that reminds your body of a past experience, kind of like what you were sharing,
Mhm.
and then your nervous system takes you into more rapid breathing. You also get what you call tunnel vision, so you lose your peripheral vision. It could also be like the couch potato syndrome. That's more of the hypo arousal. So there's the hyper arousal, which is really obvious, and that's kind of like, holy crap, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, and my heart's beating fast, and I'm sweating, and I want to run.
Mhm.
But the hypo arousal is when you're like, I can't do anything but stare at a wall, and I have more hypo, and so it took me a lot longer, because people would
Mm,
say like, oh, you're so stressed, people that are stressed, and like what that looks like. And I feel like I think half the equation has been left out of that definition for a very long time. And they're now science is starting to kind of come up and rise to more information around the hypo arousal
mm,
and more of the fawn. It used to be just fight, flight, freeze.
mhm.
And this fawn thing was like not even existent in the definition. So this 4 F's, this fawn piece is a really big piece for me, because I come from a long line of people pleasers. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, especially women,
Mhm.
and people pleasing can be a fawning response that we learn to keep the peace,
Yeah.
to keep from agitating aggressors. There's all kinds of ways that is done too. And so getting back to what I was saying was like, if we are willing to start to learn the language of of our beautiful nervous systems that have kept us so safe and so held in the way that it knows how, then we can start to communicate in a way that can help reset our systems, and
Yeah.
we can then bring in new imprints, so that when we are out in the world, we're not recycling the
Mm,
old pattern over and over and over again.
yeah.
And then we can start to really be like, well, at least for myself, it's like, oh, this is how I live the life I want to live, right? Like, I can't read another book about it.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
actually have
Yeah.
to I actually have to sit down and feel these feelings, allow, and use these tools to bring my body into safety, to remind my physical body that it is safe. And there's very specific ways to do that, and I have to be able to go through those processes so I can then imprint in my nervous system a response of safety that and by the way, like there's no such thing as all safety. It's it's we can't ever guarantee safety. We can only move further towards safety.
Mhm.
And so that's also like, because I think that can be confusing too. It's like sometimes we're not safe, but so it's not necessarily like that then you're always going to be 1000% safe.
Yeah.
But we move our bodies into safer and safer, and on that spectrum like
Mhm.
you were talking about.
Yeah. That's such a good point. And I think it is important to mention that because I think some of this stuff can feel really aspirational and then talking about like I can't read another book about it. It's a form of procrastination, right? Like it's just I'll do all of the research and I just have to keep researching and then there's no practice. Um and I think that some of it can, in the age of like wellness influencers and all of this information that we're so rapidly consuming, it can feel kind of impossible to achieve. And it can also feel like even if you are trying, even if you are putting the work in, that others are so much farther ahead. And I think it's good to mention that like there is no arrival for this. Like this is something you will constantly need to be working at. The work changes as you move through it, right? It's not all the same kind of work, but it's a never-ending journey, and it's also nobody's perfect at it. Nobody's getting to this place of like, well, I've reached transcendence and I don't need to do any other work. Nothing bothers me. Nobody around me is, affecting me. Like that's unrealistic. You still live in the world. Um other people you still interact with other people. So there's parts of it that I think it's worth mentioning. It's a constant thing and that there is no perfect response, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely not. And that goes back to that one-on-one stuff I was talking about. Like groups are so amazing, and there's such an importance on community and having community. And I should talk. I mean, I struggle with community. I
Mhm.
struggle with friends. I struggle with making friends, keeping friends, keeping family. I mean, like, I mean, one sister gets picked off every year, it's like, you're out, you're done. But no, I mean, it's not that. I mean, I love my friends and family, but just in terms of, there's a lot of, emphasis on community building and the need for community. And there are some people that, like, unfortunately, that community has been a traumatic experience for them, family and community, right? And so
Yep.
then like, where do they go? And I think that that's why I was really excited about developing something that was okay. You don't have to do this in a group setting,
Yeah.
like, um how can we, get you to feel strong enough, safe enough, supported enough, and then you go out into the group setting, right?
Yeah.
Because that so it's but getting to your point of like, there's no right answer, there's no one way to do it. It's just being able to have, know what you need, right? Like, is it community that you need, or do you need to kind of get yourself situated first, and then maybe then go out and explore more community based support and um, groups like that. Yeah.
That's a great point, because I'm thinking about the fawn response as well, and just how I think community is an incredibly important thing, but talking about trauma, having trauma within community, it can be, I think, a fear response to continue to just try to force that community in the same like context because it's what you're quote unquote supposed to be doing. So like for me specifically, I'm thinking within religion, right? Like you're supposed to be a part of a church, and honestly, it could be any religion. Um, you're supposed to be a part of a church. You're supposed to be around these people. You're supposed to be doing these things, checking these things off a list. And if you don't, you're the odd one out. Like you're wrong. And
Right.
so trying to force that community when you are hurt and you're wounded and you're trying to without healing the wound, you're just trying to like put a band-aid on it and then keep going back in. And it's like, well, you have to remove yourself first, heal that wound, and then look for other forms of community or look for, it doesn't have to look exactly the same. And so I think when we talk about, I think it's a good point to talk about trauma within community, because even in spaces that are supposed to be helpful and even in spaces that other people have found a great deal of help in, that doesn't mean that was your experience, and it's okay if it hurt you and you have to heal from that.
Yes. And you can give yourself permission to, like there's a menu, right? Like we have choices we can make. And just because a majority of people are, ordering cheeseburgers doesn't mean you have to. Like you can get the boring vegan dish. I'm just kidding. You know what I mean? But like it's really like it's totally your choice, and it's totally made for the person that, again, that's just like something very new to me. Like, okay, I really can do what's best for me.
Mhm.
And just even being able to say it, then you have to believe it, and then you have to act on it,
Yeah.
and I think that do what's best for you is kind of a cliched group, words of advice, but how many of us really do that,
Yeah.
and if so, I think that the piece around community, I hardly ever hear it really talked about, but I definitely, I really have to admit that that hasn't been good for me. And I think now this work with my nervous system that I've been doing and learning and wanting to bring to the, other people and support, is that it probably wasn't the community that was all the time in the wrong. Does that make sense? So it's like now reflecting back, there were experiences that were absolutely in my memory harmful to me.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like I think that initial imprint created more troubling community circumstances that may not have been if I was strong and centered in myself, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Because I would have been able to have better boundaries, and I would have been able to resource and know what who I wanted to be friends with and who I didn't. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I relate to that. I had a period in my life where I was coming off an incredibly large trauma and threw myself into a community, um, thinking that it was going to be just the best thing ever. And it ended up not being that at all. And I was really, really hurt by it. But looking back years later, I am able to see like, I should never have entered that to begin with. Like, I shouldn't have even been there, or if I had, I should have been there in a different way. Because yeah, there were things that were hurtful and like things that would never have been great for me. But like you said, I would have been able to have better boundaries. I would have been able to deal with it in a different way. but I was at such low capacity at that point. I'm like envisioning when you're like playing a video game and your character has like a bar of life and like it keeps getting depleted and depleted, and you're not like, you haven't lost the life yet, but it's like very low and you're almost gone. Like that's kind of what I'm envisioning. Like I was at
Wow.
very low capacity to be going into that community. I really didn't have any business doing it,
Mm.
especially the way that I did it. So looking back, you know, and it caused hurt. I ended up hurting people through that as well. And so um looking back, I'm able to see like, yeah, I should have made different decisions there.
Yes. Yeah, I love, oh my gosh, that image of the video game. Whoa, that's so cool. That's so cool. Cause I mean, I also, yeah, I always used in my practice, I would always use the cell phone, like, you know, you never throw out your phone when it needs to be charged, you
Mm-hmm.
know, whereas people would come to me like just so done and worn out and just overworked and beating themselves up for being too tired to handle their lives, when it's like, well, you don't, you know, what do you do with your
Yeah.
cell phone, you know? But
Yeah.
anyway, so that is, I really love that image. But to get back to the advocacy piece related to what you were just saying, is this is something where, you know, it's tough. Like, you know, you only know what you know when you know it. But I look back at some of the work that I was doing, and I wish I could go back and be who I am today
Mm.
in that work. Um, you know, I didn't. In some ways, I feel like maybe, you know, maybe I had no business doing advocacy work when I was doing it at the time,
Mm.
because I was so I was really, you know, I was really I hadn't yet faced the traumas that I had experienced in my own life.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, again, like Monday morning quarterbacking is always easier, but at the same time, I certainly don't want to ever repeat that pattern again. And I do, you know, I'm well aware that I probably could have been way more successful had I known what I know now
Mm.
then. You know, I think it was on paper a success, but I think that the burnout,
Mm.
um, and just the kind of the feeling that I was left with, you know, would not have. I don't think it would have ended like that. You know, I
Right.
don't think it would have um, fizzled out that way.
Yeah.
I think it would, you know, would just still have that energy like the spring, you know, like it just would have its cycles, and it would have that level of it would be regenerative. I think
Yeah.
that's really what I'm talking about. And when you're in advocacy and you're not taking care of yourself, it cannot be regenerative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. I do think that, you know, it's important for us to remember that we're all living for the first time, right? And we're all just trying to figure it out. I am constantly repeating the Audre Lorde quote, do the best that you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better.
Mm.
Um, because I do think that we do have to give ourselves grace, and I want to give you grace and compassion, because what I want to say is that I completely understand where you're coming from, and I have had those exact same thoughts, and I look at back at projects that I've done, and I'm like, 35-year-old me would be way better at doing that than, 18-year-old me was, or 25-year-old me was. But
Mhm.
it was all a stepping stone to here,
Mhm.
and had we not taken those steps, would we be here now? And I don't mean that to say that we shouldn't be taking accountability for ourselves, because I think that's a huge part of introspection, and taking internal inventory. But I do think that doing the best, knowing that you did the best that you were capable of at the time is enough.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say the same to you and to any of our listeners. And I certainly, self-reflection is just that. It's like it's taking stock. It is pros and cons, what worked, what didn't work, how would I like to do it differently, all with love and compassion, of course, being the backbone of that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So how would you, I mean, for anybody, whether our listeners are in advocacy or not, but are finding themselves on the edge of burnout, or already knee deep in it, what would you suggest for people to kind of take their first step towards kind of centering themselves and doing that internal work so that they can take steps towards healing?
Yeah, I believe that the first step is just awareness, so like in all, any kind of change requires an acknowledgement and of what is, and that what isness is really an acceptance, and the acceptance piece doesn't mean that you want it that way,
Mm-hmm.
but it does provide a pivot point. And if you are like, no, 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 I don't want it to be this way, I don't want to feel this way, you literally are energetically, physiologically resisting, and that resistance only perpetuates burnout, only perpetuates the pattern, and so it's like just that very, very, very simple, it's like if you ever go to the mountains, or if you ever go to the ocean or a river or somewhere in nature near you, a beautiful tree or something, and you go and you just stand by it, it's not like, it's not telling you what to do. It's not telling you how to be different. It's literally the reason why we love nature so much is because it accepts us exactly as we are,
Yeah.
and that feeling is something that we can give to ourselves by just, saying like, yeah, I accept fully how I'm feeling right now. And list it out, write it out or speak it out. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling like I don't know where to turn. And then end all that with, I accept where I am and who I am right now. And just that level of, like, oh, okay, I don't have to do anything right this second.
Yeah.
Because that's the other kind of habit we have in our larger cultural perception sometimes, is the doing.
Yes.
It's like, get to that meditation, like, well, you can fix it this way, this way, this way, or buy this product, or go to this healer, or all that. So
I'm gonna be the best at meditation.
Yeah. So the acceptance. And I think the other really big piece that that I'll add to that is there's pretty much not much you can do, literally. Like, there's not a conversation you can have, or a job you should be applying for, or whatever it is, or like taking your kids to school in the morning. You have to signal to your body that you are safe. Like nothing can happen outside of safety. And so I know for our listeners, especially for the topics that we discuss here, that is a very like varying leveled scenario and circumstance, but you have to find ways to signal to your body safety at some level, to make the next best decision, because we cannot make good choices and use our discernment and even be creative in the way that we plan if our body doesn't think that we're safe. We will always be reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, signaling that safety to your body, there's ways that you can do it. Obviously, there's physiological ways, and that's some of this nervous system communication tools that I was talking about, where, humming, because it stimulates the polyvagal nerve. So, which happens, whenever the reason why that happens is we have, as infants, we were held
Mm-hmm.
on somebody's chest, and there was often humming or singing, and then that vibratory sense is like calms the nervous system. So we can do that for ourselves by just humming. We can also press our hands against a solid surface. So whether it's a wall or a table, and it brings the nervous system, it knows you're grounded. So it's basically not allowing your energy to lift up and fly out.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when people are, a lot of times people will like flail their arms when they're yelling or upset, because there's that kind of that flight energetics. And so if you're pressing your hands on the table or on the wall and you're just taking a few breaths, your body knows you're right here. You're right here, right now. Your mind isn't taking you somewhere else. And the last one I'll just share that I really love, but it doesn't work for everybody. I talked about that tunnel vision that you get whenever you're in the 4 Fs. So you lose your peripheral vision. And so in order to bring your nervous system into safety, like let's say you get off of a phone call and it was really upsetting, right? Or it was irritating even. It doesn't even have to be really upsetting.
Yeah.
Just like, and you're kind of in there. You can stand straight and then bring your fingers out in front of you, your 2 pointer fingers, and look at them. And then move your arms side to side and do that. And you'll get your peripheral vision, and you just reconnect your peripheral vision with those fingers that you've, extended to your sides. And once you get your peripheral vision back, your nervous system knows that you're fine. So it's like, it's not something, it's not like you can say, I'm fine, but your nervous system has to know. So that would be a tool. So hope that was helpful.
That's extremely helpful. Are you kidding? I'm just like thinking about all of the people that may be listening that are in active trauma right now. And, hopefully that may be such a useful tool, some useful tools, because it's another one of those things where, we talk about it kind of up here, but what are the practical steps? How do I get started? Because again, I think it can feel very aspirational, and it really doesn't need to be. It's very much grounded in you, in yourself. And so you just need yourself to be able to start.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of self-love, a lot of, again, learning communication around safety. And just for me, just reminding myself of that, like, am I in safety before I have an argument with my partner? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling safe before I apply for that job or go to that interview? Like, the more we can signal. Are you feeling safe when you're driving your kids to school? Or are you thinking about something that's like freaking you out, or upsetting you? The more we get into the habit of learning how to bring our bodies back into safety, the more easy it'll become, just like when people talked about, taking deep breaths and those work. And I can give you the physiological reasons why taking deep breaths work. But again, that becomes like, okay, I've heard that before. Please explain to me
Yeah.
how to stop doing what I'm doing,
Yeah.
And so I feel that's why I mentioned some of those other ones, because I think like the deep breath it's great. Like do the deep breathing
Yeah.
for sure. But like, for me, I needed something else because I heard that before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, as with anything, it takes practice, right? It takes just being consistent as you can. And it's not going to be perfect all of the time, and that's okay. And it's I th- as you are learning anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more resources you discover, um within yourself, with talking with other people who are doing it. But I just think it's important to bring it back to what you said initially, which was that awareness is the key to change. And I think that's so important, because once again, if we don't acknowledge that something is wrong, if we don't acknowledge that there is something that needs to be fixed, or something that is bothering you, or you're feeling off, then there's no path forward to that, right? You're going to keep chasing the wrong things, because you're not acknowledging the deeper part of yourself that's saying, I'm not okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly insightful and such great tools, especially as we're starting a new year, especially as a lot of things are up in the air for a lot of people. um Wherever you are, and whatever life you're living, this is for you, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, if you want to kind of leave your last thoughts with our listeners tonight, that'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just suggest join with me. I'm on this path with each and every one of you. So I would say, like, just to repeat what you said, Jennifer, awareness, acceptance, and then move your body into knowing that it's safe. So move towards safety. Um, Many of you may not be in safe situations, and that might be very literal. And so we're not saying that that is the case, but in any given moment, you might have access being able to communicate to your body a a more safe physiological experience, and then you can pivot from there. So yeah, just awareness, acceptance, full acceptance of what is and who you are. Be proud of that, love yourself, and move towards safety.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to talk about this, and I think it's so timely, especially right now, just the beginning of the year. And um we were supposed to maybe have some other people join us tonight, but I think this was meant to happen, because I think this conversation um was such a good kickoff to the year for anybody that's in advocacy, in just living life. I mean, all of us go through this, whether or not you're in advocacy. We're all feeling this on some level. So it's incredibly important to take care of yourself and to know yourself. So I just really appreciate your insight there, and I'm rooting for you as always on this journey of
You
yours.
too. You
Discovery.
too. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was so awesome. What a treat to just be with you tonight.
I know, it really was.
And all of you listeners.
Yes, yes. So if anybody wants to catch up on previous episodes of the program, you can find us on YouTube. The channel is Suffering in Silence DV. Thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are rising out of the ashes together.
Good evening.
That's right. You had to add that. I forgot it.
It's a homage to Pastor Tia.
Exactly.